All right, well, we're gonna get moving on this on the Managing Contractor Safety webinar. Just a quick introduction. My name is Cole Craven, and I'm the Safety Director at TPM. And for those of you viewing the webinar live, yeah, if you have any questions after the presentation, please feel free to email me or to contact me. My contact information will be at the end. But more importantly, there are attachments with this that should be in a tab called the Materials tab that you really need to have. Then we'll talk about those a couple times, but at the end of this, if you can't pull those materials out, just email me and I will send you copies of the attachments. And we're going to spend some time specifically talking about that. But before we get into the presentation, if I can get my computer to work here, just a few like housekeeping things. You should in the upper right hand part of your screen have an orange arrow button. That's your grab tab that opens and closes your menu. You have a mute and unmute. You got your webcam, and right now the default is off. There's a hand raise button potentially, and then but really the best way to communicate during this is because I generally have to mute people because there's just so much background noise, is via the chat screen. And if somebody would be willing to take a screenshot of what buttons you actually have on your grab tab on that control bar, because I've gotten a couple different reports that people aren't, theirs doesn't have all the same buttons. And so I just wanted, if somebody could screenshot me that at a later date of what's on their screen when they have the grab tab open, that would be fantastic. All right, so before we get all this going, we need to ask ourselves a question: is how are we doing with our contractors right now? You know, we're somewhere on this list. We're, you know, at one where we're not doing anything but hoping they don't get hurt and hoping they do a good job. Or two, we might check on them occasionally. Three, and there's a lot of people that are in this place where we have some paperwork. We got certificates of insurance sometimes and stuff like that. You know, are we, you know, daily checking in with them, seeing how they're doing? Or, you know, are we at that ultimate where we've pre-qualified them? You know, we know who they are and we consistently monitor them and the work they're doing. And that's ultimately where we want to get to. And there's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot. But one of the big drivers is the regulations on this. And, you know, I wouldn't say that they're recent, but they are really impactful just in the last few years, is the Protecting America's Workers Act. And that has very much clarified who is responsible for the safety of contractors. And it's a real simple question. We aren't. If they're working for us, we have to inform them of our hazards, our procedures, which they have to follow at a minimum. They can do more, but if they're on our property, they're following our rules or exceeding them, and our policies. And once again, if they're on our property doing work for us, they need to follow our policies as well. And a lot of that gets thrown out the window in that we just let them do whatever they need to do and get them out. And a lot of times our contractor decisions are driven purely by price. So how do we change that? How do we make sure our contractors are safe? Well, my recommendation is that you pre-qualify them, and there's attachments on here for all of that. But you know, we pick our contractors that we know we're going to have. You know, we may have an electrical contractor. I've got a few mills that have basically a team of millwrights and fabrication people that are contractors but are on their property year round. You know, and so we figure out who we're going to have, get them pre-qualified, and we'll talk about that in particular. We need to have a safety plan, and we'll talk about that specific. We need to ensure that they're trained. All of the contractor employees that are going to be on site have to be trained, and we got to monitor it. We got to make sure they're doing what they said they were going to do. And on that training, you know, all that training, there's some of you that they're sick to your stomach because you're like, I'm going to have to train hundreds of people. That's not necessarily the case. You can require that the contractor, that the general manager, the owner, whoever may be the head honcho, you may you can require that they train all of their people on our safety programs and policies and procedures. You know, and there's a lot of reasons why. You know, it's a best management practice, sure. Yeah, you're going to have improved relationships with your contractors, but I guess for me, if you have better contractors, you tend to get better quality work done. And nothing about contractors involves our workers' comp in any way. There's confusion about that. You have an injury, you record your injury. Contractor has an injury, that's not our duty to record it. So there's been some confusion on that we're recording contractor injuries on our OSHA log. So yeah, we don't do that. So specifically OSHA and the state programs are following this to the letter. There might be some slight grammatical changes, but if you're in Washington and Oregon, you got the same thing. And it says in the standard that in no case shall the prime contractor relieve of overall responsibility for compliance. And any of the subcontractors that they bring on, they're responsible to make sure they're taken care of too. So the contractor does have a responsibility to his own folks and any subs he brings in, but we have to kind of provide the materials they need to train on. Now, we're not training them on how to do their job, but not at all. So we're not training on setting up scaffolding. We're not training on how to use hand tools. We're not training on electrical. We are training them only on the hazards of our location and of our industry. And you know what we do if we have the bad thing happen, if we have to evacuate, all that stuff. But if you have contractors there and they're not supervised, by their company, they're supervised by us, they're going to be treated in essence as employees as far as all the enforcement stuff goes. And really, that's neither here nor there, because you have a contractor get hurt on our property, we're going to get audited. We have a contractor get hurt on our property and we get audited, we're going to get cited. They will too, but we're absolutely going to be hit with the exact same things. And that's this year already. We've had a few really painful ones of those. But it does not apply to like your delivery services, and it may or may not apply to like the Cintas folks. But if they're going all throughout the facility, regardless of who they are, then this applies. If they're stopping at the front office and going no further, then it doesn't apply. Or if they're going to the shipping office and not going anywhere else, then all this stuff does not apply. But like your fire extinguisher folks, yep, they're a contractor we would need to ensure was trained. Any electrical contractors, construction folks, plumbing, really just use your imagination. If they go out throughout the facility, they're a contractor we have to train. And some of those, we won't know who they are until something breaks. And that's fine. That's fine. We'll talk about that. But we have a pretty good idea who we know, or we think it's very likely they're going to be on the property in the coming year. And so those are the ones that we'll want to pre-qualify and develop a site safety plan and even a manual for them. And those are all attached. They're in your materials tab, but if you can't get them, let me know. And the areas of focus, and this is driven from 100% from real life OSHA audits, whether it's state or federal, but especially federal. They are going to look at, I should have put HAZCOM, hazard communication, HAZWOPER, or chemical safety. And they need to be trained on not just, their chemicals, which would be the contractor's responsibility. They've got to be trained on ours that they would be reasonably likely to come in contact with. And so there's going to be instances where, ideally our contractor will come in and they're going to be completely self-sufficient, with equipment, tools, chemicals, and then we really wouldn't need to train them on much of anything other than chemicals that would be reasonably likely to be in their area that were ours. They're going to absolutely look at lockout tagout. Contractors are required to follow our lockout tagout program at a minimum. And so we would want to have something in there on some of these machine-specific procedures on just the machines they're going to be working with. So it's every one of these programs is going to be a little different depending on the contractor. And this is a big one. This is one I'm going to say it a couple times because this is very unpopular. If we're going to let them use our equipment, we have to train them, we have to test them, and we have to evaluate them. And if they're driving our forklift and our scissor lift, well, you got to do that. Train, test, and evaluate on both of those pieces of equipment. If you're letting them use your backhoe or your skid steer, same deal. And this one bites a lot of people in the butt, and that we'll just let them borrow it for a day or two. And the bad thing happens, people are getting interviewed and they're like, oh yeah, we drive their forklift around all the time. Okay, well, let's see where, we trained them. And statistically, not happening very often, maybe 1-2 times out of 10. And that's probably being generous. They're going to absolutely look at your confined space, your permit required confined space, if they're going to be working in that. And some of my folks, they have contractors that are the ones exclusively who go into confined spaces. And so they need to be trained in the hazards of our confined space or spaces. We need to have some sort of rescue plan, and permits have to be completed. If it's a permit required confined space, we got to have permits and paper copies to prove that it was done. Now, this one, we can potentially talk about this one for hours, but we're just going to touch on it a little bit. If you're one of the folks out there that have anhydrous ammonia or some real large amounts of chemicals, if they're doing anything that could affect that or release that, reasonably likely, then we have to get into process safety management. But that is a massive animal. Hopefully we won't have to get into that, but this is not going to apply to like your fuel tanks or your pumps on site, or if you have propane, unless you've got like 6 or 7 rail cars sitting on your property. It's for large amounts of chemical. And I don't know if it's surprising or not, but far and away, the most commonly cited thing from my experience, from the OSHA top 10, from everything, is fall prevention or the fall protection. I've had contract drivers get hurt, and we got cited because we had not trained them in how to use a harness and fall protection. Seriously. So if they're going to be doing that stuff, we don't have to provide the equipment. In fact, I would say please don't. But we do have to make sure that they're trained and understand how to use it correctly and what to do if they have somebody fall, because we have to have a rescue plan with that. But this gets cited very, very, very frequently. And recently they've been citing people because the contractors weren't ladder trained and certified. And I'm not joking at all. If they're going to be using ladders on our property, we have to train them on proper ladder use. Or we have to provide the materials that they get trained on ladder use. So I don't want to freak anybody out and make you feel like you got all this training, you just got to add it onto your plate. We just have to make sure that's addressed in our contractor safety manual that we provide to them, or our training materials. And then you make their boss do the training. At least that's what I would do. So what do you need to do right now? I would get looking at who your contractors are right at the moment. Get them, go through the pre-qualification part. Have them fill out that form that's attached on, what their injury rates are, their workers' compensation stuff, on their OSHA logs. You have a right to request all that. If any of you do business with the feds at all, you should be used to providing all this stuff. We're going to ask them about their safety programs and plans and safety training. And ideally, technically, it should always be done before the work begins, period. I know real world, that's not happening, at least not frequently. But we should be getting these pre-qualifications and the safety plans and the contractor safety manual completed, to them, they're trained on it and it's completed before they start working. So if it's, if nothing else, that safety manual can be a tool to get all the contractors' employees trained, or all the contractors' employees are going to be on our property. And it can, and in fact, I would go so far as to say should be completed by the contractor supervisor, whoever's the boss in charge of these folks. I do have a few places where they've got a big, beautiful safety training room, and they'll bring in the contractor employees and put them through like a formal classroom session. Is there anything wrong with that? No, not at all. It's just time consuming, and all of you have likely too much work, on your hands already. So make them do it. We're paying them to do work for us. That could be part of the work that they're doing. We want to look at their safety performance, and we'll look at measurable things. How many recordable cases, how many lost time, how many restricted, OSHA citations. But we need to know, is their senior management committed to safety? Is safety an integral part of their project management? And do they have their own safety and training programs in place? Because we're still going to train them out hours, but really, if they don't have any of this stuff in place, they're not doing any of it, do you really want them on your property, around your employees and around our buildings and equipment? So they don't do any of this. I personally, I wouldn't want them anywhere near my folks. So we do need to, it's very, very, very important that we have somewhere in that contractor safety guide or manual who supervises them, who supervises all the contract employees. And they can treat those folks, all the contractor employees, as like direct to hire for us of ours, if the host employer, that's us, provides the majority of all the supervision. Because then the contractor supervisor is only a figurehead. So we can get into some other issues with that. I wouldn't lose too much sleep over that. The takeaway is identify who supervises them and that they're going to be on site. So I don't care who supervises them at their headquarters 160 miles away. That's not supervision. I want to know who's going to be on site that's in charge. And I know I've already said this, but we got to do it before the work gets started. Because if we don't, it's likely not going to ever get done. So, okay, how do we do all this? It's so much work. Well, we're going to have these packets together, the pre-qualification packets and some of the contractor safety, the contractor safety stuff. And we can't really do the site safety stuff until we know what they're working on. But we're going to build a whole bunch of packets, and we're going to send them out to our regular contractors on January 1st, asking them to complete it. And if they completed one last year, that's great. They're doing another one this year. And to have it back to us, before the work starts, within 30 days. But that's one of the first things when the new year starts. I mean, obviously not doing it on January 1st because hopefully we're all off. But on January 2nd, or when we get back in the office, that's a lot of times, my number one thing to get done is get all those contractors taken care of so I don't have to worry about it. So what's in that packet? The information request, that questionnaire. There's going to be a handbook with safety policies, and there should be some safety training materials. And I probably will say this 10 times, but have them train their people on our safety programs. And because if we do it, it is beyond super time consuming. You'll likely be doing new employee orientations and contractor orientations every week there. So have them do it. But we do have the responsibility that all employees on our property are properly trained, ours and theirs. So that orientation should include, at a minimum, all the physical and chemical hazards on our site. Fire, combustible dust, if there's some toxic release hazard, our general safety rules, our emergency actions. So the bad thing happens, where do we go and where do we meet up and who's doing the head count? And they're going to be going to the same place as everybody else. We're going to talk about the work permit procedures, and that's confined space. that's hot work. There may be a few other ones, but if they're going to be doing, any of those things, they're filling out a permit and we're getting copies of it. And then other just like day-to-day issues. What hazards are unique to our site? And we may talk about stuff in our industry, but specifically, I want you to focus on the job site that they're going to be working. And I've said this before, and I a few slides ago, but I can't stress this enough. If we let them use our equipment, we have to train, test, and evaluate each and every contractor who's going to operate that equipment. So if we let them use our forklift, our scissor lift, our skid steer, and another vehicle, we are doing that training, testing, and evaluation on 4 different items. If you want to add a front end loader in there, well, it's going to be 5. So every piece of equipment, we are required to make sure that they're trained and certified to operate. If they use ours, if they bring in their own stuff, it's none of our business. I take it like it's not none of our business. They still have to operate professionally, but the training we don't have to, unless you want it, we don't have to have proof in our hands. The safety and work plan, and I'm showing this picture in particular because this is a real world photo. It's not staged, it's not made up. This is not anything. This is really what was going on the project site. And when we finally had one of our representatives go up and see this, they were aghast. They were shocked because we'd never gone through the site and the project and talked to them about anything. You should ideally, if you've got a big project going on, you should be talking to them every day, if not multiple times a day. So we've got to make sure we ensure a safe work environment, even if they're the ones that are setting things up that are making it unsafe. So that's difficult. That makes things a challenge for us. But it's our property. They're going to do it our way. And this is all designed to protect your employees, their employees, our building, our vehicles, and in the local community. And we do this before entry. And we'll do this as oftentimes as necessary to ensure that they're aware of the hazards, or that they're aware that this setup in the picture is completely bananas and is not acceptable. Okay, oh, there we go. Now, this is kind of next level. And I know real world, once again, that this is not done by everybody, but if you have job hazard analysis or job safety analysis done, they are a phenomenal tool to use to train contractors. In fact, if we've got one for a job that, type that they're going to be doing, I'd give them a copy of it because it just reviews all the hazards for each task. And got to remember that we're not training them on how to do their job. We're training them on on our hazards, and if necessary, our equipment if we're going to let them do it. Or if they're going to be, in some cases, we'll bring in contractors, like labor ready folks, and they're doing line work. They're doing regular work. Well, now we do have to train them on every single one of those tasks. So if you have those labor ready folks or the contract to hire folks, you absolutely should be reviewing the JSA or JHA with them. So it's a great tool to train contractors, which those people are contractors up until the point where we bring them on board. They're likely going to be trained, they're going to be treated as employees regardless, because likely their supervisor's not there. And so we're responsible for supervising them. More than periodic, I would do daily, if not multiply daily. If you got a great contractor and they're doing it right, well, then maybe it is just a daily, but immediately correct deficiencies when you find them, if possible. And if we can't correct it, then cordon it off or protect people from it. But that safety plan, that work plan, should be kept at the area they're working and available for anybody. But these need to be documented, reviewed, and updated so that the site safety plan, it could be a little bit different for every contractor. And you don't have to just, you don't have to, type a million words to put this thing together. We're just talking about the hazards in the area they're going to be working, the hazards, of our site, and what they need to do to keep themselves safe from those hazards. And so we got to have something documented that we reviewed, and we're going to update it whenever necessary. So, okay, our heads are spinning with all this stuff. And just I guess getting right into it is, in essence, they need to have some sort of safety orientation and know the policies and procedures and what the expectations are. And I do mean disciplinary actions that the contractors need to know. If you do this, you're done, you're off the property. And if you've got JHAs or JSAs that are applicable, I would absolutely give them copies of that. But the trick is the continued management of this. And that's a big problem, is a lot of times we'll hire a contractor and then we don't even check on them except to see when the job's going to be done. And I doubled up on this slide. What is going on? But they got to follow our safety program, ours at a minimum. I do know of contractors that are way more safety conscious than the account they're working at. That's great, but at a minimum, they got to follow our stuff. There's got to be somebody from them that's an on-site project manager or site supervisor or whatever we want to call it. There's got to be a point person that we can get in contact with, because I don't want you guys to get caught in the loop of training each and every one of their employees. We'll train that site supervisor and make them, share it downward. But it's essential for this being kind of a smooth and efficient operation. It is so important. And it limits how many people you have to go in and talk to. And it should limit how many people you're having to train and look after. So we've got to have that contact person. And they've got to understand that we and they have we share that responsibility and liability. And with the liability, I'll say it again, that they have liability, but we do too in what they're doing quite a bit. And they should be professional. May not seem like something we'd have to worry about, but I've dealt with a few folks that are pretty foul, who refuse to read things, that did not solve problems in a way that was efficient or fast. So we do need to create guidelines to go over our policies and our contractor safety rules. And we have to have documentation of that initial training. Even with all this, mistakes are going to be made. Review those near misses, review those injuries, and come up with a plan that they never happen again for them. I'm not saying we got to go over every injury we had, but if they have something happen or almost happened, we're going to go over it, we're going to document it, and we're going to have a plan so it never happens again. It's it's something that's got to be measured and monitored. You can have in there, if you want, for your contractor safety stuff, you can put say a number on how many injuries are acceptable. I don't know if I would fiddle with that right off the bat, because you might end up having to get rid of a contractor because they had 6 boo-boo claims and the guys never even went to the doctor. So I don't know if I'd mess with that right now and kind of launching this, but we've got to monitor it, we got to measure it, we got to make sure it's being done. Because really at the end of the day, it's our responsibility. It's our bank account that would take the hit. It's our company that would have the OSHA citations and bad record on our history, on our name, even if it was contractors. And if you needed more incentive, how does this help you? Well, we have a good safety program. It is a catalyst. It's a roadmap for reducing accidents. If we just have our minimal stuff, just paper, safety programs. It's just in a 3-ring binder up somewhere that nobody looks at. Doing stuff like this will take it out of that unused, really, paper program and makes it a real world thing that's actively being monitored. But it's also, I don't want to get too much on my soapbox, but you commit to excellence and safety and quality, that's not a bad thing. Because I think everybody says safety first, but I think that quality and productivity have to have an equal. They all have safety, quality, and productivity all have to have equal weight. But you lose one of those, we do it without safety, you're going to have poor quality and lower productivity. You're not getting as much product out the door when you have 3 people hurt. You have poor quality and bad productivity, well, we're increasing production costs. So these all tie together. And if for no other reason, it's going to keep your life a lot cheaper, whether it's your insurance or your OSHA citations. You're compliant, helps you a lot with that. I like the decreased risk to my folks, their folks, the property, equipment, product, and most, not most important, the employees would be the most important, but our reputation. We don't want to risk any of that. And I cannot stress this enough. If the contractor makes the news on your property, so do you. If the contractor really upsets OSHA, you did too. You're going to get the audit and the citations. And unless you have all this stuff documented and we did our due diligence and we monitored it every day, then we might have an argument that it was unavoidable, contractor misconduct. But then the catch-22 with that is if it was unacceptable contractor conduct, why are they still on the property? If they still are. But make that contractor do most of the work. I don't want you doing the data collection for these pre-qualifications. Absolutely not. I'd prefer you weren't doing the training. I don't want to add anything to your plate. But it's a real simple equation. Better contractors equal better quality work. And they may have a little bit of an increased cost, going in the beginning, but you get a bad contractor and you're going to have that increased cost of the project more towards the back end. It's just the better contractors you tend to get better quality. It's been my experience. So tons and tons of information. How do you really, really get started? If you're at ground zero and you've done nothing, what I would do is first thing I'd do is put together a contractor safety packet. There's one of those in the materials that's attached. If you want to use your new employee orientation as a template, that's fine. You need to change it, get all the employee and that terminology out, make it contractor specific. Or you can use your APP, your accident prevention program. If you're in Washington, format it to fit the contractors so we're not saying our name or saying employees. But you want to also develop that pre-qualification packet. That should be pretty easy. There's a safety criteria form that I would send out first off if it's like a brand new contractor we don't know anything about or we have real questions. Have them fill out that little questionnaire. And if that looks okay, then I have them do the pre-qualification form. Send them the more in-depth form. So we've got a contractor safety packet put together. We've got our pre-qualification packet. It exists. It's ready to go. Well, let's put together a list of our contractors that we know we will use in the coming year. And send out that pre-qualification paperwork. If they're already working, so be it. That ship sailed. We still need to get I'd still recommend getting the qualification stuff done. But without a doubt, we have to get them the contractor safety packet. And there are formats or templates attached for that as well. So we've got our packets together. We know what contractors we're going to use. They fill it out and their record is acceptable. Then we send out the contractor safety packet, safety manual. We're going to request that they provide us proof of training of their employees. I'd say within 30 days, or at least before they start working, if they haven't started. You need to get a copy of their certificate of insurance, and we can absolutely set the limit for what they have to get dollar-wise. And then we're just going to do this with our regulars every January 1st. And you'll put together packets for the unplanned contractors and just run them through the process. And you may have to be a little bit more of a stickler for time frames on this. And yeah, if we got somebody coming in 2 days, well, they need to get this all done within 2 days. That's their thing to worry about, or you better have a plan for how you're going to do it. And so the attachments on this are really important. These are the things you've got attached. They're in your materials tab. And if you can't get them, you can't save them. And that's if you're doing this, if you're on this webinar live, what is today? April 21st, 2021. You should be able to get them off of that. But if you're attending this live and you're a member of TPM, I will send these to you. Just email me after the presentation and I'll put my email up and I'll send them to you. For the folks that are watching this, 3 months from now, 6 months from now on YouTube, unless you're a member, I'm not sending you anything. So, but we've got that. We got the screening criteria, that questionnaire. We got a couple different pre-qualification forms. The first one is pretty basic. The second one gets way more in depth, and that it's your choice on those. There's a contractor safety overview and a safety manual attached, and then there's a template for a site safety plan. And we need to train them on the sites that they're going to be at. If we've got water treatment and they're getting nowhere near it, we don't have to train them on that. You might want to let them know that we've got that, but we're going to train them on the hazards of where they're at. And you want to format these to fit your company, the risks and hazards, but you really probably won't want to enter your company's name. So your stuff doesn't say insert company name here or your company in parentheses. So make it fit us. It's only going to benefit us to have these things look nice, be accurate, sleek, if you will. We don't want a bunch of unnecessary stuff in there. But if you can't get them, just email me. If you're a TPM member and you're on this webinar live, and if you're a TPM member, period, just email me and I'll get them to you. And that is my cell phone. And so if you guys have specific questions about this stuff, and just call me on my cell. And if I can't answer right away, it's probably because I'm on the phone with somebody else, but I'm happy to help. And if you have specific situations and contractor situations that you're not sure, or I didn't do a good job of explaining, all these different situations, just give me a call and we can discuss that. Or you can email me, of course, or I can come out to the job site for you and we can look at it specifically. But I do really, really want to thank everybody for attending this. This is one that I know pretty much across the board, just about every industry has room to get better on this. About 50%, well, actually more than that, when we have a bad injury with a contractor, every single one of my accounts have been cited as well. The contractor may have been, but so were we. So it's something real, and it seems like a huge thing, but it's really very routine once you get the initial push done. You're doing January 1st. All you're doing is mailing pre-made packets and tell them to have it to you, by the end of the month or within 2 weeks or whatever you set the parameters to be. But that is it.